Next topic is async and await. So this is nothing but an enhanced way, a modern way of handling asynchronous operation when compared to the promises or the callbacks. This actually makes the code very easier to write and readable with the when compared with the promises and other callbacks. That is the main thing. So what is async and await? Async is a function that returns a promise. Whether it is resolved or rejected, it returns a promise. Await is a keyword that is used inside asynchronous function to pause the execution until that promise is resolved or rejected. We will see an example. So before jumping into async and await, we will create a very basic function. So we have created a function and we are going to call that function. Say hello console.log of result. So when we run this code, you will have the output hello and world printed because we are calling this function. While calling this function, you will have the console log first printed. It will return the world value and returning the that will be captured using this variable and that will be printed. See, okay. Now this is a normal function. Now we will see what is async function. So as we said, async function or asynchronous function is a kind of function that will return a promise. Now what we will do is we will just create another function fetch data. We'll just delete all this. Now in order to simulate the scenario that this is a long running task and this will take some time, we use timeout for around 3 seconds so that we are simulating the scenario that this will take some time to complete. So this has to return a promise and that promise have to be resolved. Here we will use timeout line, timeout code. Set timeout of we can specify how many seconds we have to. 2000 in the sense it's 2 seconds. Resolve data received. So this is a normal function that will return a new promise. Now I am going to create a function with async. So this asynchronous function has to return a promise. So we are going to call that other function. So inside this asynchronous function, we are going to call this function fetch data that will consume around 2 seconds to complete and get the promise return. So after this const data, and just adding a console log. Now when I run this code, this should print fetching data. Then we are going to call this fetch data function using await. What this await keyword will do is, this will pause the execution here until this fetch data returns a promise and get the promise stored in this variable, and then it will resume the execution to the next line. So in fact, if await is not there, this is not possible. So now we will just run this code. We will just call this get data function. See, fetching data, it took some time, then you got the next step, which means fetching data, then it was calling this await, resolve, and you get the next step. If you print this data, you will have some output. Fetching data, long running process, data received, which means this promise have been called and that promise have been resolved. Only then you have got the result that is printed. After that you have the next step console log statement. So this is how we can implement asynchronous and async and await. So we'll just imagine that this fetch data will download a file and we are passing the file name here. File 2. File 3. So by this way, we will be able to call multiple times this fetch data without the code making us confused. But if we implement the same scenario without asynchronous and await, either by using callback or using promises, let's see how that will look like. So for that, I will just comment this function and I will just rewrite this function. And inside that function, I'm going to call this fetch data. Fetch data of file 1 dot then result console log of result. Then I have to call for the second file. So I'm just not handling the error and finally block, catch and finally block, because if that is also added, then code will look really complex to understand also. File 2 and file 3. See, just we are having then block for each function call with the promise, but still the code looks like a little bit complex when compared to this asynchronous function. See, you can see the difference between this async await and this function. This we have used this we have written using promises. So this is one method, like handling using promises. But if you want to implement this same scenario using direct callbacks, that will be further more complex code. So that is most complex code, and this is better one. This is understandable, but this is very finest and easily understandable code when compared to all the other steps. So that's what I told. This is modern way of handling asynchronous operations very easily. We can just delete this. That's it. We have a function and we have called that function multiple times using async and await. That's it.